Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm calling to order this special meeting of the Town of Oakville's Council. We have regrets from Councillor Sanju, and otherwise we're all here. Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, there are none. Council, our first and only agenda item for this special meeting is the cannabis legalization one-year review. And there's a staff presentation from Margaret Boswell, our Supervisor of Enforcement Services. Ms. Boswell, Council looks forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of Council. I am here to speak on tonight's special Council meeting to provide an update on cannabis legislation 1 year after it has become legalized. As part of the presentation, information will also be provided on neighboring municipalities who have opted in to allow licensed retail stores and the number of stores opened in these areas, recent legislative changes, enforcement of the legislation. In addition to this, public input is always an important piece, and so this will also be discussed during this evening's presentation. This information will assist Council in choosing whether Oakville continues to opt out of licensing retail cannabis stores or to change over to an opt-in status. Cannabis became legal in Canada on October 17, 2018. At that time, access to legal cannabis was limited to online purchases from the Ontario Cannabis Store. The initial sale of cannabis through private retail stores began on April 1, 2019, with licenses issued by the province through a lottery model to help phase in the introduction of stores. Municipal councils were given the opportunity to opt in or out of the private retail sale model by January 22, 2019. Opting out would mean the municipality would not permit cannabis retail stores within its boundaries, but had the option to opt in at a later date. On January 14, 2019, Council passed a resolution opting out of allowing licensed cannabis retail stores within the town of Oakville. With this decision, Council may move to change the status to opt-in to allow cannabis stores with the understanding that once a municipality chooses to opt in, the decision cannot be reversed. As mentioned earlier, the province initially restricted the number of licenses for cannabis stores through a lottery system, but is now moving to an open market for licensing. This change will come into effect on March 2nd, 2020, today. This means the number of licenses issued in municipalities that have opted in to allow retail cannabis stores will no longer be restricted. The Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario, or AGCO, started to accept applications from prospective retailers in January 2020, with the first licenses being issued in April at an initial rate of 20 per month. There have already been 700 applications received by the AGCO for new locations. There will be some limits imposed on the number of retail store authorizations for applicants. For example, if before September 2020, there's an applicant that already has had 10 authorizations, they may be restricted to more licenses being issued. To date, no changes have been made to legislation to allow municipalities to regulate cannabis retail stores through business licenses or specialized zoning. On October 17, 2019, cannabis regulations were updated to establish rules for production and inclusion of the sale of 3 new classes of cannabis at licensed AGCO retail locations. Starting January 6, 2020, these new classes will be edibles, meaning products made either from cannabis flowers or concentrates, extracts, also known as concentrates, meaning products that have been extracted from the cannabis flower and processed into a concentrated form, and topicals, meaning products like lotions and creams that are infused with cannabis. As part of the transition to open market, the province is requesting feedback on the potential implementation of additional cannabis business opportunities in the future, including the sale of cannabis for consumption in establishments such as lounges or cafes, cannabis special occasion permits. The province will be collecting feedback between the period of February 10th and March 10th of this year. Cannabis consumption establishments and special occasion permits, if brought forward, would facilitate the purchase and consumption of cannabis in specified social settings, such as cafes, entertainment venues, festivals, and events. There is no specified time frame for a report back from the province on any planned changes based on this feedback. Changes to the Smoke-Free Ontario Act are not being considered as part of this consultation, which prohibits smoking and vaping cannabis in indoor public places and other designated areas, such as children's playgrounds and sporting areas. The consultation form has been circulated to various town departments for comments. As part of the feedback to the province, staff have asked that cannabis consumption lounges and special occasion permits for cannabis festivals and events only be permitted in municipalities that have opted in to permit licensed cannabis retail stores. The proposed comments to submit to the province may be found in Appendix A on the addendum for Council's consideration on the potential implementation of additional cannabis business opportunities. The AGO licenses and regulates private retail cannabis stores in Ontario. An applicant looking to obtain a license from the AGCO must obtain a retail operator license and a retail store authorization for each retail store they intend to open. Once a license application is received, a municipality may formulate submissions to the AGCO on matters of public interest. These comments are restricted to concerns relating specifically to protecting public health and safety, protecting youth and restricting their access to cannabis, and preventing illicit activities in relation to cannabis. Comments may be submitted within a 15-day window from date of application. The AGCO not only limits the nature of comments submitted, but municipalities are further limited as there is no ability to create a business licensing regime or create special separation distances or restrict uses under zoning for cannabis retail stores. Based on the areas permitted for the retail store use, there are few restrictions on where a cannabis retail store would be permitted within the town. The province's restriction relating to separation distance from schools is the only regulation specific to locations of cannabis retail stores. There are currently no limits or caps to the number of stores within a municipality, nor are there any distance requirements set in the regulations defining how close cannabis stores can locate to one another within a municipality. Last year, the decision to opt in or opt out of allowing licensed cannabis retail stores from operating within a municipality was met with mixed opinion throughout the province. At the same time as that, Oakville made the decision to opt out. Other municipalities within the region of Halton, such as Burlington and Halton Hills, made the decision to opt in. More recently, on October 29th, 2019, Milton changed their position to an opt-in status to allow cannabis retail stores after the original council direction to opt out. The AGCO's website also provides the current status of cannabis retail store applications and a map that identifies the location of authorized cannabis stores. According to the website, the following information relating to licenses issued in neighboring municipalities who have opted in states that Burlington currently has 3 licensed stores and 3 applications pending. Hamilton currently has 2 stores licensed and 2 applications pending. Both Milton and Halton Hills do not currently have any licensed stores and do not have any applications pending for any new store locations. Moving on to the matter of enforcement, there are many divisions that enforce the Cannabis Act and related legislation. The AGCO compliance officials inspect retail store locations for compliance with the Cannabis License Act. In 2019, the AGCO received 10 complaints relating to retail stores within within Halton and with a total of 462 province-wide. Within Halton, Halton Regional Police enforces matters relating to illegal sales of cannabis, drug-impaired driving, and youth in possession of cannabis. In 2019, Halton Regional Police did not see significant increases in charges relating to cannabis. There was, however, a notable increase in cannabis-related charges against young persons. Through their program, Halton Regional Police continue to support the public through educational campaigns. Halton Region Public Health Inspectors also play a role in the enforcement of the Smoke-Free Ontario Act 2017 through supporting community partners with policy development and communication interventions. In 2019, public health inspectors received 26 cannabis-related complaints or inquiries for the region, with 4 that were specific to Oakville. These complaints related to smoking cannabis in parks, at work, and distance requirements for cannabis smoking from patios. Following the initial distribution of funds, municipalities may look for provincial revenue from the federal excise tax for cannabis. If a municipality opted out as of January 2019, the municipality would not be eligible for additional funding regardless of a future decision to opt back in. The current model states that if revenues exceed $100 million over the first 2 years of legalization, the provincial government would provide 50% of the surplus funds to municipalities that did not opt out as of January 22nd, 2019. Given this, if Oakville continues to opt out, there would be no revenue share of federal excise duty provided even if we were to change to an opt-in. Regardless, opt-in, opt-out, there's no future or further revenue coming from the government. Over the past year, there have been several different methods for the public and municipalities to provide comments on cannabis legislation. For those municipalities that have opted in to allow for licensed cannabis retail stores, policy statements have been created. The objective of these statements was to help municipalities identify areas within the public interest to provide direction to staff for the submission of timely comments to the AGCO within the 15-day window that were offered for public consultation. For example, these statements could identify specific uses such as not permitted in a proximity to a municipal park or libraries, and support distance restrictions between these uses and a retail cannabis store location. A policy statement also gives staff delegated authority to respond to the AGCO due to the short window for providing written comments. The public have also been able to submit questions or complaints through Service Oakville. Over the past year, 29 inquiries have been submitted, with 13 relating to cannabis retail opportunities, 5 each for enforcement and opt-out information, and some other various concerns. The last part of the presentation refers to the proposed recommendations brought forward tonight relating to the decision before Council to either continue to opt out or to opt in to allow licensed cannabis retail stores. Thank you for your time this evening. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, you've prompted at least one. Councillor Knoll.
I have a couple, if you don't mind. So I just want to clarify a point that was made during the presentation in terms of the lack of municipal control. Are there examples of any other business that get that treatment?
In terms of the
not requiring a
restrictions?
license, not having to comply with zoning regulations?
To my knowledge, I can't think of, but
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could add in, I would say that there's no other business that I can think of that isn't bound by either a requirement to license and or a requirement to comply with zoning.
Okay. I want to just understand something you said today. I don't think I realized before. So this issue of the additional licenses that or stores, for example, that Burlington have and other municipalities have over the original allocation. Is that out, so once we've approved, or if we were to approve it today, we don't get one store, we can get as many stores as the province decides to license, is that correct? And we have no say in any of them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, you are correct.
Okay. The 150-meter distance separation between schools and the cannabis stores, is that similar rules that apply to licensed establishments, liquor license establishments, beer vendors, the Liquor License Control Board, that sort of thing?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I am uncertain if there are any established requirements for liquor stores or any other licenses issued through the HECO at this time.
And in terms of the LCBO, do they require a business license to operate in Oakville? Or do they have to comply with zoning?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, they do not require a business license.
So that is an example of an agency that doesn't. How about zoning? Do they have to comply with zoning?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they would comply with zoning, but again, they would be complying to the commercial zoning.
Right, but would we be within our rights to, because the thing is, we can't zone to provide restrictions for cannabis stores, is that correct? So we can't say that in this zone you can have a cannabis store, in that zone you can't. You're not allowed to do that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're correct. We can't specifically zone a location for a cannabis store, so we couldn't say, create a cannabis zone and say you're only allowed in that store. They'd be allowed in any commercial zone in the town.
Okay, and that answers another question I had. So they do have to comply with our commercial zone rules, so you couldn't have one in the middle of River Oaks or, okay. Can you tell me, have there been any examples of where a municipality has provided comments to the ACGO about a proposed location and what the outcome of those comments were, if there had been any? I'm trying to understand if the province is actually listening when it comes to citing these stores.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, our neighbors, Burlington and Milton, both have established policy statements. It is unclear at this time whether or not they've had any impact to the stores that have opened at this time. But they do have policy statements that they have put in place.
Okay, I just want to be clear. So one of the things that was made very clear was that, don't worry, you have the right to comment when we're going to build a store. I remember that from last time. I'm assuming that's the same today. I think I saw that in your report, correct? So
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes,
so
that is correct.
So my question is, has there been an example where a municipality has said, oh, not in that location, or that wouldn't necessarily work, where the province has actually responded or altered the application at all?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do not have that information at this time.
I've got a few more, but I'm going to defer because I know other members want to get a piece of this as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Margaret. Has use gone up in municipalities that have approved, that have opted in?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at this time, any of the data that I have collected that hasn't been a stat that has been measured. I do, as part of the staff report, there was an appendix that did provide stats on charges issued by Halton Regional Police. It seemed that the data that they provided does reflect an increase in charges issued against, for cannabis-related charges against young persons. There has not been a significant increase in impaired driving. Having said that, Halton Regional Police also have indicated that it is unclear with the term impaired, whether that is impaired by drugs or whether it's impaired by alcohol.
So I'm going to get to the enforcement, but so far we don't, there's no information anywhere on whether use has gone up since municipalities have opted in or out?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the information and statistics, that I have gathered have not uncovered that statistic specifically.
Okay.
It is unclear if that exists at this point.
Okay, do we know about the underground economy in opt-out places? Did the police provide any information on the weed maps and do just a statistical overview on how many vehicles I'm staring at, like, on weed maps right now, circling around Oakville, delivering weed right now? Did we get any of that information and compare them to opt-in or opt-out municipalities?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we did not receive that information from police services.
Okay, did we look at that information?
As part of, through you, Mr. Mayor, as part of the research for the report and the information brought forward was specifically gathered to present enforcement statistics, charges issued, various different agencies that have engaged in enforcement. With respect to underground economy, that was not part of scope for this particular report.
Okay, I do tend to remember the discussion that was an aspect of the discussion we had a year ago. You know, if we opt in, are people just gonna go to Burlington? Or if we opt out, are they just gonna go to Burlington? Or is there gonna be a vacuum here created in a servicing need, which a free market economy would probably say, yeah, there's more here. So I would have hoped to have seen some information on what's available to see if there's a vacuum here, as there's no options here. So, okay, I'll save my comments for now. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Councillor Duddick?
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, Councillor Knoll hit on several questions I had, but I would share for information purposes that Burlington did have a situation. The mayor, Marianne Mead Ward, posted something about a week and a half ago about the fact they had commented and were completely disregarded in terms of their comments at the authority.
Councillor Giddings, I think, is next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate Councillor Knoll's questions on the open market. One of the other items in the report talks about cafes, entertainment venues, festivals, and events. So that would only occur, the availability would only occur if we were opted in, I assume.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that was part of the feedback, the proposed feedback that is contained within the questionnaire, is that staff would recommend or have questioned that if licenses were to be issued for special events and or cannabis lounges, so to speak, that they would be only considered for municipalities that had chosen an opt-in.
Because, thank you, currently, if there's a temporary liquor license or a permanent restaurant alcohol or beer license, that comes through the municipality. So it wouldn't come through us if it were for edibles or the others. Your understanding?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, our understanding, the parameters of the questionnaire are quite vague. Our understanding is that through the special occasion permit that they would proceed in a similar fashion to what they currently do for special occasion alcohol permits. Having said that, again, we have within the feedback form commented to the fact that if you continue to be an opt-out municipality, that we would then suggest that any municipality in that status would then would not receive applications for special occasion permits and or cannabis lounges.
So let's say Midnight Madness, downtown Oakville. We've got, they could apply, the BIA would apply, or would it be a retailer would apply, or a vendor would apply? I found it very vague as well, and I'm just trying to see if there's someone that can shed a little more light on it for me.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can assist. Unfortunately, part of the problem is we don't have the information on a lot of this. We're simply being asked to provide comment to the AGCO on how they might formulate their future regime, should there be one. So unfortunately, what we've provided are comments on what we think should go forward. What they plan on, we don't know yet.
And if, I appreciate that, Mr. Berry, and if we opted in, whatever came as a result of that, the questions that are, or the commentary that's out there now, we would own that, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
All right, thank you very much.
Councillor Haslett-Thiel.
Thank you for your presentation and your research. Councillor Knoll got lots of my questions, but I would like a couple clarifications. So you spoke to them having to qualify under the commercial zoning, but I'm looking at page 12 and it's saying that, in fact, that they would have a classification of a retail store and therefore would generally permitted mixed use in including residential, commercial employment zones in Midtown. So is that in fact the case? It is retail and therefore these stores could then be in residential or mixed use buildings?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can assist. Again, it's wherever retail is permitted, which is in commercial and often in mixed-use zones.
Okay, but it could be in residential, which was a sort of a big aha when I read the report.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it would be in a residential zone where commercial was permitted, so that would be the mixed use. In a purely residential zone where commercial wasn't permitted, the retail wouldn't be unless there was some zoning that permitted that.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. My other question is around so we've gotten, thanks to Councillor Dudek, some anecdotal feedback. Did we pursue any other anecdotal feedback from municipalities around their experiences just in terms of the impact on residents, impact potentially on fellow retailers that now have this store in their plaza? Did we go after any of that information, or was that beyond the scope of what you did?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, through our research and investigations, we did ask one of our neighboring municipalities for any sort of complaints that may have come in through their service counter. The feedback was that it was minimal. So it is, in my estimation, would be likened to what our service counter, Service Oakville, has received. And again, the enforcement of any complaints regarding those retail establishments, the licensed cannabis retail establishments, would subsequently truly fall under the AGCO enforcement in terms of anything to do with the licensing. Halton Regional Police would also assist with any matters relating to falling within their jurisdiction.
Okay. There's a comment in the report about public health, Halton Public Health being prepared to step up and do some more education around edibles, et cetera. Do you have any time frame or any more information you can share around what the public could expect in that regard?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at this time I don't have any further information surrounding their public education campaign. I believe they are currently working on what that is going to look like, and it should be available within the next several months. Having said that, I don't have specifics on what that looks like.
Okay. Those are my questions for now.
Thank you. Councillor Grant.
That jumped to me quickly. I appreciate the work that's being done to point, especially what we had up to last year. I'm just wondering, on social media, I've been seeing a lot of people saying that they have varying opinions, but are not comfortable coming into a public realm to make those comments. I'm just wondering what we've been doing over the last year to gather public comments. Have we had open houses? Have we talked to the public? Have we gone to the BIs? In fact, Councillor Haslett-Thiel gave us a very nice email from the GCRA talking about how they're torn as well over the whole issue. So I'm just wondering, what have we been doing to kind of do an outreach to get the real pulse of the public instead of just having a public meeting where people who are comfortable with the issue are coming forward?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can assist with that as well. If council were to choose to ask us to go out and conduct some public consultation, that's something we would do. For this report, public consultation was the feedback we would receive tonight. If council again needs further feedback, it would be by directing us to go and hold public consultation meetings.
So would there be any harm then for us to ask for public consultation tonight instead of making one of the decisions that you put before us?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's certainly something that council could ask.
Then I might have an alternate motion later. Thank you.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask a little bit of a flashlight question to our staff about Appendix A, which I don't think was really completely and fully covered in the presentation. And I wonder if staff would be able to provide any further commentary in part for the public's benefit, outlining the province's consultation on expanding the cannabis business opportunities. I think you've written a pretty good Appendix A with some pretty good commentary, and I think it's quite helpful that you've done that, particularly around the issue of only extend these business opportunities to those areas that have opted in, and if you've opted out, that ought not to come to that municipality as well. So I think those are helpful comments. Do you have any other highlighting comments that you want to provide to the public? Because I know a lot of people have read the main report, but I'm not sure how many have realized or reviewed the appendix.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Through the questionnaire, some key highlights would be for the consumption lounges. We have recommended that they not be open to those under the age of 19, so youth or children, that they clearly would be limited to edibles, extracts, and topicals only, given the comment that they aren't reviewing the regulations in Smoke-Free Ontario Act, so it would only be logical to us that you would only permit edibles, topicals, and extracts. Further to that, we would recommend that we would want to continue to license if there was any component of food other than, we would still want to continue with our licensing program under the licensing regime and issue food shop licenses. Apart from that, we had also highlighted sort of risk, like the province had requested a risk analysis of what we thought might be some key highlights of risks that would follow suit if they were willing to license consumption lounges and issue special occasion permits. So we have obviously identified that some of the risks that surround such a program would be sales to minors, overconsumption and driving, lack of control in the levels of cannabis in the recipes. How will we know what's the individual is consuming? And then potentially, if there's a mixing of alcohol in the cannabis product, one of the opportunities that may exist and would have to be further explored is whether there's any tourism or revenue generated from that. And then, of course, for the special occasion permits, it's difficult to control in a special event the parameters under which a cannabis consumable would be sold, and then how would you limit that product from falling into the hands of a minor. Food is, from our understanding and thought process, would be entirely different than, for instance, selling alcohol at a special event, because generally you'll see a cup and it's a solo cup, and it's well identified. You have to maintain, be in a restricted area. Food is more difficult to manage because it looks. How do you differentiate between the brownie being sold at the vendor down the way versus the brownie being sold within the confines of the that special location? So those are a few of the risks. And then, further to that, obviously, we just want to ensure that if a municipality does continue to choose to opt out, that any sort of new licensing program would not then befall upon that municipality.
Great, thank you. I guess that brings a new meaning to skip the dishes. I appreciate that, and in either case, no matter which direction council ends up going, you recommend us passing these comments on to the province as the community's comments, as the municipality's comments.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we would. The comments are expected to the province, or requested to be to the province by March 10th, so just in a few days from now.
Thank you very much for highlighting that. Appreciate that.
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Most of my questions have been covered. I just do want to comment on Councillor Knoll's question about our neighboring municipality, Burlington. So the policy that they did pass through their council was a preferred 500-meter distance from any sensitive land uses, including schools. And there is an application pending right now, or I believe it actually was approved, and the cannabis store will be located within, I think it's 270 meters of a high school. So their comments to the province were ignored. And then my other question is around the feedback that's due by the 10th. Do we have any idea of when we can expect to hear back from the province on the feedback that they've collected?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the information that we have received from the province is being very vague. To date, it is, the only information that can be assured to us is that the feedback will be taken and reviewed, and they will provide an outcome or output at some undetermined.
So no timelines?
No.
Okay, thank you so much.
Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. Just a couple quick questions, and thank you for the presentation. The edibles, extracts, and topicals, going down, let's take it down a little further and talking about cannabis as special event permits for that. Does that just include those three? It doesn't include smoking in special events?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, with the restrictions found within Smoke Free Ontario, it would be difficult to have a smoking of cannabis within special events. You know, dependent on if it's a private facility, if it's indoors. There are certain regulations that are set out in Smoke Free Ontario that would limit the areas that potentially could have smoking available to it.
So what you're saying, smoking is not allowed, would not be allowed in the special events, but only those three areas, those three that identified edibles, extracts, and topicals, but not smoking. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if there was a special event permit to come in and the event was entirely outdoors, there is a potential that a special occasion permit could be permitted.
For?
If the event was entirely outdoors and wasn't inside or had any.
Okay, I'm not clear on it. So is smoking allowed and a special permit outside of marijuana or cannabis?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if the event was entirely outside or outdoors, yes.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Robertson.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a follow-up to that one. If we have a municipal bylaw for our public parks to say that you can't smoke, I assume that a special event that takes place in our public parks would also say they can't smoke there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that question, it's difficult to know what the outcome of that question is. Currently, if we continue with an opt-out status, clearly that discussion becomes a non-discussion. Having said that, if the decision is to change the status to an opt-in, we would have to see what the province was to come out with in terms of their program. It is unclear at this time whether that would be something we would have any ability to control.
Okay. it's separate to that because I see this as that questionnaire is such a separate entity to what tonight was supposed to be about. Are there any charges in all of Ontario, not just from Burlington, and all of Ontario, of stores that were selling to minors and have been charged?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a statistic of violations issued under the Cannabis Act in 2018, having note that there were 293 violations. So that's approximately about 2.73 violations issued. Having said that, I don't have any other further information.
None of those would have been legal cannabis stores, though, retail cannabis stores, because they didn't start till 2019. So I know that when I look at the audience, and I know that a lot of the concerns go to whether minors are going to be able to access cannabis through the stores, through retail stores. That's the statistic I think that is really vital. If there hasn't been any in a year of stores being charged, that should tell you a lot about how strict they're being with their sales. But I would love to see a statistic to say if that is true or not.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have the statistics of complaints in Halton. Having said that, we do not have the number of charges laid or if they resulted in any charges.
Okay, but so you don't know if a single charge has been selling to a minor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do not have those details at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chisholm and then Councillor Dudek.
Just a quick question. We've been at this for 1 year, so would it be safe to say our statistics and data are really not relevant at this point in time because we're just having a transition into this? We need more time and a longitudinal study, maybe 2 or 3 years to get a better handle on this? Would that be a safe assumption?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Dudek.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. Given the comments and the questions that surround the smoking regulations and this particular one, is there one that trumps the other, or are they both regarded in the same category? In other words, some regulations tend to get trumped by another one, but this one I have a feeling is just the same, is it not?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can help out. I believe you're talking about all the regulations contained in the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. So they run in parallel. The smoking is cannabis and cigarettes are covered.
Thank you. Councillor O'Meara again.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to go back to those, the Oakville statistics where we said we received 29, not complaints, because half of them were looking to open up stores, I guess. So they weren't complaints. I'm trying to find what the experience has been between municipalities who have decided to opt in and municipalities who have decided to opt out. So and I believe you had mentioned you did ask Burlington about similar incidents, but I don't see any of that information in the report. Do you have some detail, like what was their experience having said yes compared to ours having said no?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was not able to gather any concrete numbers to include as a reference in the report. To answer the question, that is why that information is not included in the report.
And did we talk to the AGCO to follow up on Councillor Robertson's information to see what statistics they had on municipalities in Ontario and what their experiences had been when they optioned in, and what the results of legal operating retail stores and did we get any information from them about whether they have charged any, or like any stats on anything that's happened in the last year for municipalities that have opted in?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the information that the AGCO provided did not result in any information surrounding charges issued. The general information that they provided was more surrounding the number of complaints that they received.
So we didn't ask if there have been any charges. I mean, I'm just saying this because most of the residents here had a couple of fears that there's going to be youth are going to have easier access. It's going to be prevalent in places that it wasn't before, and I just don't see anything in the past year that speaks to any of those issues. So I'm curious how we're supposed to make a decision tonight without the information that many residents were expecting after a year to at least find out, if not from our Halton partners, but from some municipality in Ontario here.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll try my hand at this. I think part of our problem goes to Councillor Chisholm's question, and that's the amount of time that we've had. A lot of municipalities, my understanding is some of the conversations we've had anecdotal answers to some of the questions we've asked. Unfortunately, that wouldn't make it into the report tonight. I think the concrete information that we've been able to gather related to the AGCO and the amount of complaints they've had, related to the information we've been able to pull from our service Oakville, related to the information that the Halton Regional Police have been able to provide to us. We wouldn't want to provide information that we couldn't verify, so that didn't make it into the report. It's certainly something we could go back and ask and see if we can provide something more concrete. Although what I would say is I believe that over the course of time, we'll be able to provide a much more clearer understanding of the impact. The simple fact is the time to this point hasn't allowed us to do that.
So then in my final point, question here, Your Worship, is just then, so that staff's professional opinion then is we don't have enough information for council to make this decision tonight? Is that what I'm hearing?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what I'd say is we've certainly got limited information and we've tried to provide that to you. Unlike other issues that we may face, there's actually a large quantity of information out there that we can dig into. In this case, we've actually got a year of legalization, but less than that when you consider that some of that time was simply the mail out from the province of cannabis. Stores came online quite slow. We have heard, you asked earlier about the black market. There's anecdotal information out there about black market, certainly nothing that we would want to put into a report. You know, I think what we do know is that the sales at the provincial level weren't what they anticipated.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Hazletil?
I guess further to that kind of line of questioning, do we have any insight on what made Milton change their mind in October?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do not have that information readily available at this moment.
So thank you for that. And you know what, this is a conversation that, you know, clearly there's more information we're feeling the need to have. And, you know, I think JCRA nailed it. We need to have not only public consultation where people feel comfortable, as Councillor Grant supported, but we have a need for more data, and not just black and white data, but really insight into what other communities are experiencing so that we can make a fair and right decision for all residents.
Now, staff are saying there's not a lot of experience out there to learn from because stores are so recently happening. So looking to experience for your reason, for your position, will lead you to that spot. I, myself, already have enough, I know enough and I have enough information to form a position, and I'll speak to that later. We have a couple more speakers, Councillor Elger for the first time, and then Councillor Dudek again.
Thank you. Through Mayor Burton, I thought I heard staff say they wouldn't want to report on the black market, but what I've been reading is that in fact, at the legal stores, there's no young people really coming to them. It's the older people coming, because at the stores it's too expensive and they all have their dealer anyhow. So it will not have an impact, they don't think, because it's already getting a better price on the street than what the stores are offering. Could staff go back to the province and get data on that going forward for us so that we make those right decisions?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I certainly think there's an opportunity to go and get data. I think there probably will be studies written over the next course of time. From our perspective, that time is something we would need. Certainly we would recommend before we could come back with a fulsome report with hard data, we would be looking at 12 months or plus to get those reports in.
Councillor Dudek.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm glad that Mr. Berry did raise the issue of the limited information in regards to, or relating rather, to the sort of delayed implementation in some of the municipalities. Is there a way that we can request or suggest with the province that one of the things they give us is a tangible, when did that shop open, relating to whether there's complaints or whether, what kind of sales they're undergoing or any problems? Because people all seem to think that it's a year for the time period, when in fact it may be as little as 4 months, given the fact by the time the people got their financing or supplies started rolling out. So if we can do that, that would also be helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Lischina.
Thank you, Your Worship. As I recall, going back to our initial discussion about opting in or opting out, the big thing that really was sort of, I would say, the message that got to all of us was the fact that we have no authority where they go, or at the time, we thought it was actually very limited amount of stores, and now we've learned that there is no limit. So not only do we have no authority, we also don't have the number of stores that could be within our town border. So that was a major issue for me back then. It's still a major issue for me, and I also do have enough information to make a decision at this point. Thank you.
All right. We have, if there's no more questions from, Councillor Robertson, I beg your pardon, didn't see your hand.
Hi. Last year at AMO, I attended the Ottawa session on their experience of, opting in and what it was like at that point. And it was recent. I mean, they'd had their stores for 4 or 5 months. At that point, it's a university town. So those, things that came. They have something called a cannabis legislation operational team from the municipality. Every department in the municipality is part of it. I don't know if that's something that would be a good thing for us to look at doing, just so that we're more secure in how it's developing in terms of the information we're gathering.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's certainly something that we can investigate.
I think maybe we've exhausted our questions. Shall we turn to the delegations? Madam Clerk, would you call the list of delegations?
The first delegation is Xiao Feng Su.
Welcome, sir. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak at this stage. On behalf of our communities, on behalf of generation, and on behalf of our children. My name is Xiao Feng Xiu. I have been a Ward 6 resident for more than 3 years. I love Oakville because of our clean air, our friendly neighbors, and our supporting council. That is also why I am here. Speaking of cannabis, I would like to ask myself a few questions very seriously. This is a one-way decision. Once opt-in, we are all in. There's no way back. We must think it twice. We cannot make a decision that we will regret in a few years. I just cannot imagine the case that if cannabis store was open in Oakville, I pointed at a store to my son and say, "Hey, Justin, you know what? I helped make that store happen. Are you proud of Daddy?" First question I have here is, does cannabis store bring in economic benefits? Honestly speaking, I'm not sure. But the sales from other municipalities seems to tell the opposite. This cannabis store bring in lots of deficit. The second question is cannabis store necessary in our life, just like the supermarket? Definitely no. We have enjoyed our life without cannabis store for decades. For those who need it for medical purposes, there have been lots of channels that they can get the cannabis medication. And last, does cannabis store create concerns? A lot. Road safety, community safety, children's exposure to cannabis, and potential health issues, and all the questions that you have just raised. So I'm very clear, we need to opt out of cannabis store. Now let's look at what the community say. I have got the signed petition from 2,300 square residents. All of them were registered and presented to council in 2018, December. These petitions clearly show that what our residents are going to say. They all want Oakville to opt out of cannabis retail store. Moreover, the surveys on Twitter and Facebook have clearly shown that people are saying no to cannabis retail store. These are all strong messages from our communities. And thanks to everyone's efforts and decision, we opted out of cannabis store in January 2019. Now let's see what have been changed since then. The minimum distance from school is still 150 meters. How far is 150 meters? The running track is about 107 meters long. Seriously? Do you want our children to be exposed to such environment? Do you know why so many kids are addicted to cell phones, to tablets? They see these electronics everywhere and every day. Put them away. There have been many studies on how habits were developed. If you don't want your kids addicted to cannabis, keep them away, far away. Financial aid. It has been clearly said on the website that it's still the same. And municipal control. The provincial legislation still prohibits municipalities from licensing and zoning cannabis stores. There has been no change at all. Why do we need to change our decision? Oh yeah, I have to mention, there's definitely some change. There's a huge increase in marijuana use among drivers. I'm really concerned about our road safety. Now let's look around. We still have Caledon, Markham, Mississauga, Newmarket, Pickering, Richmond Hill, Vaughan, and Whitby opting out of cannabis stores. Among these municipalities, many of them have not even considered reopening the vote in the near future. We are not alone. These are all great, famous, and attractive municipalities. Learn from the wise. They know what they are doing. They have made the right decision. I talk to different people every day, our neighbors, my clients, friends. When they mention Oakville, it is always a sign of home, peace, and love. If we look at the population chart of Oakville here, we can see how attractive Oakville is and how fast Oakville is growing. They moved here because Oakville is the well-known, most livable place. They come here for our safety, for our advanced education, for our health care quality, for our green environment, and for our lovely people. Cannabis is a substantial threat to our growth. My cousin's family in Richmond, BC, is coming to Oakville because of cannabis problems there. Let me tell you what people's real concerns are. Safety, break-ins and thefts. From this chart, we see there's a dramatic increase in theft from 2017 to 2018. We should put our efforts and focus on solving these problems. All in all, I'm here to represent those 2,300 residents to remind councils that we do not want cannabis retail stores in Oakville, and we urge you to opt it out. Thank you.
Thank you for your information. Council, do you have a question? Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please.
Next delegation is Melody Yang Zhu.
I know this lady has to leave early. Can we switch or have to go with the order?
I'm going to poll the audience for people who didn't register, and I have no problem with, I don't think council has a problem with you speaking for her. Welcome. Council looks forward to the information.
Thank you. By the way, I did register. It's just that I prefer to present a bit earlier because I have other commitment. So thank you very much.
Oh,
for
perhaps we
coming.
misunderstood.
That's
well,
okay.
In that event,
So I have
please
here
present.
presentation. No, not this one. The other one. That's me. Yeah. Send to you. Okay. Good evening, Your Honorable Town Councils and Your Worship. Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. My name is Cindy Yu, and I'm a proud Oakville resident for the past 15 years. And I am one of the 23 residents who signed the petition just now mentioned. So cannabis retail store and cannabis legalization in general has been a heated topic among my friends, family, and my colleagues. And tonight, I would like to share my observation and candid opinion on this topic from a broader business perspective. So, next. Sit down. Okay, thank you. Good go. So first up, the cannabis industry. How did we do since legalization in October 2018, about 17 months ago? Here's the picture I find. The graph here is as of Q3 2019, but the picture is still similar as of today. Overall, the cannabis stocks are in the losing pit in 2019. The shares of what were then top 10 largest Canadian cannabis shares lost 57% of their market value. For third quarter alone, the big four in the industry collectively lost $14 billion. That's billion dollars. Cannabis gross, $6.05 billion. Aurora Cannabis, $3.49 billion. Kronos Group, $2.33 billion. Tilray, $1.77 billion. Again, those are in billions. So these are the big guys. There are many savings as why we got here and what had happened. But as of now, as an outsider, what we can see are no tangible profit, and nothing indicated that 2020 will be a profit year either. If the company has to sustain or grow, they have to issue new stocks, or they have to reach in their owner's pocket, however shallow or deep that is. black market is still prevails, mainly due to better pricing. I'll come back to this topic a bit later. So overall, the industry is a startup in nature at best, with its usual uncertainty in sales, management, and cash flow problems. So what does it mean to the cannabis retail stores? I'm asking, if the big guys are not doing well, how about the little ones? If we were to allow cannabis stores to open in Oakville, are they really going to bring vast tax revenue to the town? Are they really strong retail tenants? Because if revenue is not there, they have to reach in their pocket to pay rent. And how much would the cash burn last? And are they really going to create massive employment opportunities? Or are we facing another case of Target retail store? Here today, gone tomorrow. Hype versus reality. So now let's go back to the forever question of black market. Most research that I find indicated after legalization, black market is still very much alive because they have cheaper price. I think some of the council just mentioned earlier, and they have more varieties, and obviously they have harder drugs. And one more question always remaining in my mind, maybe some of the council audience can enlighten me, is if the true problem we're facing is youth marijuana usage, but youth cannot go to the legal channels anyways, where will they go after legalization? Obviously, it's still the black market. So wouldn't the black market now just focus on youth consumers and potentially pushing harder drugs on them? These are, to me, just common business sense. So essentially, on the issue of legalization, yes, we're taking profit from the black market for adult users, but how did it help to combat the youth marijuana usage remain to be seen. And now the edibles are coming. Oh, wait, they are already here. Just to sum up, there's so many different varieties of edibles. There are baked goods, there are drinks, capsules, ingredients, extract, oil, candy, cotton candies, dissolvable strips, and butter, etc., etc. The list just goes on. Most edibles contain a significant amount of THC, which can affect users for a longer period of time. Health Ontario indicated it is easier to be poisoned when eating and drinking cannabis compared to smoking or vaping cannabis. So just from its format, they are much more attractive product than their joint counterparty. Just look at these pictures. I think they look very attractive at 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, if I can ignore the green leaf on it. Oops. All right, so how about the regulation of edibles? As we all know, federal government amended the Cannabis Act in October 2019 to allow for, Cannabis Act in October 2019 to allow for edibles. And the earliest edibles in its legal format started just December last year. And as with many new regulations, it really needs time for the manufacturers to become familiar and prepare to comply with the new rules. And monitoring could be proven even more difficult because of these products' physical similarity to their counterparty, which has no cannabis, and the products are extremely attractive to children. As we can see, both the regulation and product in their legal format are new to the market, just 2 or 3 months old, and yet to be tested, revised and tested again by time before we can be confident that regulation has covered all possible aspects and achieved the goal of consumer protection and youth protection, and in particular, how can we make it truly child-resistant? last one. Thank you. The last one. There we go. So if there was a motion to vote again for opting or opt-out a year after our decision in January 2019, I would ask all our honorable council these questions. Have we exhausted all the due diligence work? Does the economic benefit outweigh the controversial social costs, and with what certainty? Do we have sufficient resources and guidelines from the province to undertake this project? And are we in a comfortable position to exert town's right to control, to guide, and to monitor? Because, again, I need to stress this is a one-way ticket, and we need to be absolutely responsible for the 206,000 Oakville residents. And we have to ensure this is not a bumpy ride for us to rush in. I would encourage Oakville to opt out of cannabis retail store at this point, given the negative macro factors that I have just presented. And thank you very much to hear my opinion and my concern.
Thank you for presenting it. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, the next delegation. Thank you, ma'am.
Any questions?
No, ma'am.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk?
The next delegation is Chris Kowalchuk.
Welcome, Mr. Kowalchuk. Council looks forward to hearing from you.
Good evening, through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. Last year I was rambling and I took notes, but I just want to cut to the gist of the matter from what we've heard tonight, we've talked about, is the issue was last year, and I made a pop culture reference to a sadness pile in a failure bowl. And I realize most people don't know that reference. It's a patent Oswald comedic sketch. Google it. Having said that, that was the reference to the way that the federal government handled decriminalization. In fact, by putting Bill Blair, the chief of police in the largest city in Canada, who was in charge of making sure that no one ever got marijuana, and they put him in charge of the program and the rules around making sure everyone got it in a safe way. And then we had a regime change provincially, and without being, too partisan, that's, again, they dropped the ball in the way that they didn't consult with municipalities and came out with these arbitrary rules around the establishment of retail stores, where at last meeting I had application pending to be one of the lottery winners who could have told you where I'm putting the store. And unlike I believe when it was going to be under the auspices of the AGCO and the LCBO, the Ontario Cannabis Store, that there were no municipalities that were going to opt out of the program because they were confident that that provincial agency, which has a proven track record of dealing with retailing beverage alcohol, would do a responsible job of doing it with cannabis. And if I'm not, the salient point around the reason that Mississauga and Oakville opted out was because, in fact, that they gave this permit holder of this magic weed license arbitrary power to dictate to any municipality in the province where they were going to put the store. And if I'm not mistaken, you license where someone could put a dog grooming shop or a restaurant, but you can't have any input into it, or even another, I believe maybe beverage alcohol outlets, but you're going to have no input whatsoever, control over where you're going to put a cannabis store. And that is the primary reason. So, what my question is do you think with regime change, which may happen, that there will be consultation with the municipalities to change the rules around can they retroactively take away the rights of these license holders to put the store wherever they want? Is that something that may happen? I'll ask that. So I'm torn to see where the council goes with this because nothing has changed. And, assuming the way it went with the sixth biggest city in Canada, Mississauga adjacent, and Oakville, communities of substance in this country, in the province, that there's been an ongoing consultation to address the issues the municipalities had around opting in. But what I see is that it's basically around everything they've done, and there's absolutely none, and they've given you a take it or leave it, gun to your head approach with this license in the store. So again, I'm torn because I think it's a joke we're even having this discussion. The fact that in 1972, the Ledane report, for those people who are not familiar with Canada, the minority report on the decriminalization of the recreational use of cannabis recommended that they open retail stores in 1972. And the demonization around cannabis, I would like to tell any of our new Chinese
Chris,
Canadians who are here,
Mr. Kowalczyk.
through you, Mr. Mayor, to Google the black candle because it gives it a reference. So having said that, Sean, you made a question about, are people smoking more or less whether the stores are open? Well, I can tell you from personal experience, anybody who smoked weed didn't care that there were stores or not stores. And I mean, I haven't bought any legal weed except for the first week it opened to get the container to carry it around in. And I've never seen a more wasteful system. You know, for years you could buy it in a clear plastic bag, a quarter pound. Now you get like, something to fill up your recycling bin with. Plus you can grow it like tomatoes. I used to be a liquor rep, and you brought up about the whole special occasion permit thing around cannabis. Smoke-Free Ontario deals with that to create a whole nother level of unenforceable special occasion permit. I think it's a big waste of time and a bit of a wormhole to go down. And as far as worrying about kids getting drugs, who smokes dope here? You know? Like, to Mark's point, a lot of people aren't going to come to a meeting and say they smoke dope because there's still that stigma and that taboo. But the reality is we have an opioid crisis and fentanyl, and it's prescription pills that kids are stealing out of their parents' pillbox that are the problem. It's not weed. So, to get back to it is like whatever council decides, I would confidence you. I'll be disappointed if you decide to go ahead out of prurient interest that you're missing the boat, even though I think it's insane that we don't have stores. And I mean, anyone read the Globe and Mail? There was an article. The esteemed leader of this province has a track record of making money in this industry, and I can't believe with the powers in his hands of the province of Ontario that they're losing money doing it. It's a joke. So whatever you guys decide, I'm sure you'll make an informed decision, but I just want to give a counterpoint perhaps to some of the presentations you'll get tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Kowalczyk, thank you very much.
Any questions?
You never disappoint. Never has he disappointed. Madam Clerk.
Next delegation is Steve Sousa.
Welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilman. I've just been listening here. I've been a resident of Oakville my entire life. I'm a type 1 diabetic, so I suffer from neuropathy pain. I've been using medicinal cannabis legally now since March of 2011. I've been making my own creams and my own salves for my own pains and stuff, and I've actually come to the conclusion that I'd like to help other, people like cancer patients, people that use it for pains and stuff. So for me, I wanted to open a dispensary selling edibles, everything related to cannabis without actually selling raw product. So for me, like, I hear everybody with the concerns about their children and stuff and having the stores, but in all reality, if you look at every other corner, there's a liquor store, there's a bar, there's something with alcohol. Alcohol is 1,000 times worse than cannabis. They say cannabis is a gateway drug, but in reality, it's not. Drugs like even prescription drugs like Percocets, Tylenol 3, they all have opioids in it, stuff that make it addictive. Whereas cannabis is used more for pain relief. A lot of people use it for anxiety, some people for depression, fibromyalgia. There's tons of uses for cannabis other than just getting high. Now, I've got two 15-year-old daughters, a 15 and a 16-year-old daughter at home. And I explain to them about my cannabis. I am very open with them. And they understand. They tell me about some of their friends that smoke and stuff, and I explain to her about the damages it can do to children at a younger age. So I explained to them, one day when you're of age and you decide that this is your choice, at least if we are open with our children, then they'll be able to make that decision for themselves. Whereas there's a lot of people, like my daughter will not even smell, like just the smell throws her off. So I don't keep her around it, and I explain to her, this is my medicine. So for children to understand the concept, I think is a big thing, as opposed to them going to the dispensaries and stuff. The whole thing about the black market, yes, because it's cheaper to go through the black market. I think that's where a lot of the problems lie. The fact that these major corporations, they don't have the experience in growing the cannabis, which is another problem on why the market is dropping so much. Stuff like us being able to grow our own. Legally, we can grow 4 plants per household. So if kids are gonna get a hold of it, they could grow it in their own backyard. Like, I mean, you can't say, no, you can't do it that way. Things got to be regulated, but there should be a control as well. So there should be more parental guidance there. Me wanting to open my store, I think it would be common sense not to want to open anywhere near a school. You want to keep it away from parks, But I can't tell you how many hundreds of people that have actually spoken to me about this, and seniors especially. The creams that they make that are good for like arthritis and stuff like that. These are options that they really can't get because they can't walk into a store and find it, because these are things that are controlled. So for me, I believe that cannabis should be looked at not as a drug, but as medicine. Just like people are like, well, you can't smoke and drive. Well, that's fine. You can't drink and drive as well. But you can go to the liquor store and pick up a bottle of booze. No one's not going to say that they don't crack that bottle open and drink it on their way home. So it's the same thing with cannabis. It's a matter of control. Everything, at least the way I've been doing it, everything is regulated so that you have an exact amount per, let's say, serving. Let's say if you're doing gummy bears, everything's got a percentage. So just like alcohol, you walk into a liquor store and you could buy 2 2-4s of beer. You go home and you drink it all. Well, you're gonna get sick, you're gonna get alcohol poisoning. Well, if you go home and you buy an ounce of weed and you smoke it all, well, good luck to you for that. But if you can do it all, you're not going to get sick. You may raid the fridge a little bit, but, you're not going to get vomiting. You're not going to find yourself alcohol poisoning. So to me, I find it a lot safer than having like a bar and stuff. And again, it's all about choosing your choices. If you choose to walk into a liquor store and buy that bottle, it's because that's what you are using for yourself. For whatever reason, maybe it makes you feel better, that's fine. Same thing with cannabis. If that is going to help you, relieve you of your pain, why would you not be able to have access to it? And especially on the amount of seniors that are in Oakville, I can't think of another more natural way of healing themselves, as opposed to all the narcotics that are going into our systems that are causing our hospitals to get more people in there because of all the problems from the chemicals. So in the end, I just, I know it's a lot and a lot of people are against and some are for. I truly hope that the council will look at this and consider the option, because it's not just about having smokable cannabis, it's about being able to medicate and have people that need it for pain be able to medicate. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information. Yes, sir. Would you like a question from Mr. Knoll? Mr. Knoll?
Sure, absolutely.
So I just want to clarify something, and I mean, this is, I'm asking you personal information, so if you don't want to answer, that's fine.
Absolutely, no.
Prior to cannabis being legal in Canada, did you hold a medical marijuana
I
exemption?
I did in March of 2011.
Have you ever had an issue with accessing medical marijuana?
No, because legally, my prescription allows me to grow my own.
Right.
So I have a controlled amount that I'm allowed to grow.
But you've never had an issue obtaining the
No,
marijuana?
actually, I've been pulled over countless times.
Okay.
And they ask for it, and from the dispensary I was using,
Right.
they have stickers, they have a card. So every time, and I would present my Ontario papers, and I've never had an issue.
What about creams and other medications that are prescribed? Are those readily accessible to those that have medical need?
I actually, the lotion that I've been making for myself, I actually have 3 doctors that are trying them right now. And they're using them because some of their patients are suffering from the same pains that I suffer from. So I believe, like, again, you can't get high from the topicals.
No, I understand. You're going a different direction than I'm
Oh,
going.
sorry,
I'm
sorry.
talking about access. I'm trying to determine access here.
Oh,
'cause that's
okay.
what it's about. It's about-
Again, that's something that I had to research on my own and start making on my own because it's not accessible through, or at least I've never found it accessible that way.
Are they
If they have,
accessible through the Ontario Cannabis online store?
the online store, I don't know because I'm licensed to grow my own, I can't go online.
Right.
So, through them, I don't believe so, but I know some, like the dispensary, there's one in Burlington, they sell the edibles. They do have topicals there as well, so I'm sure it is accessible.
So if it's at the store, then it's likely on the online site as well.
Yeah, I would imagine
Same, same supply chain.
Yeah, I would imagine
So the seniors and such that you're talking about should have access to these products. They do have access to the products in Oakville.
They should be
Probably more
able to
conveniently,
through their
actually.
doctor,
Right.
through their doctor, as long as they're recommended through it.
So they don't necessarily need a cannabis store. By not having a retail cannabis store, we're not restricting access for those who need it for medical purposes. Is that a fair statement?
It is, but in this situation, whereas if you order online, it could take up to a week to get, as opposed to somebody runs out of their cream or pain and they're in some severe pain, they can run down, to the local store and pick up their prescription.
Shoppers Drug Mart's online store says 24 hours, but.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Souza. Madam Clerk.
I just want to confirm whether Melody Yang Zhu is actually in the audience. Yes? Are you Melody? Okay. I had called you earlier, so I thought, okay. Would you like to delegate?
Yeah, is it my turn?
Yes.
And then up, downs go from here. I double click it. All right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Member of Council. I'm a resident of Ward 6, and on behalf of 144 neighbors and their families, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to address to you tonight about why Oakville should opt out for the cannabis retail stores. We're pleased to see Oakville opt out for opening cannabis retail stores last year, and want to make sure this year's review and decision are also done properly. And to make sure we, the more than 144 Oakville families, are front and centered to your decision this year. We have the opportunities to review the staff report, related regulations and legislations, and variant market reports. The enormous uncertainty due to the lack of control, the foreseeable increasing pressure to the town's budget, the conflict with existing cities' priorities, and the possibilities negative long-term impact to the local communities made us deeply concerned about the great risk that cannabis retail store will bring to town of Oakville and its people. And thus we are here today to urge you to opt out for it. And now allow me to unfold our concern in details for you. While the profitability of any cannabis retail store is highly questionable, as we just heard from the previous speakers, the uncertainty it brings to Oakville is clear. The legislation of AGCO regulates, license, and enforce cannabis retail stores. As long as these regulations stay unchanged, Town of Oakville doesn't have any control, authorization, neither direct or control of the day-to-day operation of this business entity and many of the related issues. When the situation is out of town's control, it is uncertainty and already posed a great dangers to the local community. Furthermore, there are many unknowns which need more parameters, more research, a longer time horizon for the entire country to learn about. How well the public education and awareness program may work. How much the so-called municipality's cannabis retail policy statement established by Burlington can help. Do we have the answer? No. Oakville is like other municipalities, is not in a better position of knowing any of this. However, what we all know is that there's no leeway for town's decision. If there is any adverse long-term impact to community, it will stick for us forever. The situation is even more dangerous than driving on a foggy sleeper skyway because you cannot even back up. Then any individual will logically question why we're so rushed to make an irreversible decision on something that we have no control and don't really know much about it. All previous mentioned uncertainty bring great concern to additional pressure to town's budget. Town of Oakville just announced a 2% property tax increase in 2020, which is higher than 1.53% hike to the property tax in 2019, and higher than 1.75% increase in 2018. It is Town Oakville's promise that your budget ensure that programs, services valued by our residents are maintained. It ensures that the town's strong financial position is maintained. Tonight, you've heard the voice of nearly 2,500 residents telling you that we do not value any cost into cannabis store or any related event. And we think it is entirely inappropriate to opt in because opening a cannabis retail store is not going to strengthen Oakville's financial position. Furthermore, we believe having cannabis retail store in Oakville put the town into a position to fail your mandate, as the uncertainty and risk will also create competing priorities and distract the town from delivering its promised services and strategic priorities. Use road safety as an example. Many of the municipalities and regions in GTA are having and promoting the Vision Zero program. They're putting their effort, their budget around this vision. School zone is certainly the center of this vision program, because to make our kids safe is every single family's and community's priority. Now, however, the regulations we just read, it still requires only 150 meters distance from the school for any cannabis retail store, and have no details to define the distance between any two cannabis retail stores. So, in theory, there could be more than one of them surround our school and kids. And when town cannot enforce the store and not clear about the client's behavior and impact, how would you promise and ensure there will be accident-free around the school zone? Town of Oakville has a critical role to play to ensure its residents' needs and safety, And we, the people who pay for the property tax and basically the existence of the town, rather you to stay focused around the service that bring value to our families, such as upgrading your library program, ensuring us a clean and proper size of community center, improve your mobility with innovation technology, and even innovative business model, reduce the break-ins. Did I just say reduce the break-ins? Yes, I just did. Reduce the break-ins, reduce the break-ins, reduce the break-ins. Sustain our environment, and maybe even make the snow removal sooner in a more greener manner. You have lots in your hand. To bring irrelevant uncertainties to burden your taxpayer and derive yourself from your promise is confusing, inappropriate, and is not acceptable. I would like to bring your attention to the current global turbulence that Oakville residents are facing and sharing with the rest of the world. Looking into 2020, the parents are crushing our head for the continuous strike days. Communities are panicked for coronavirus. Many people are impacted by the sharp dropping stock market, and businesses are facing great uncertainties. And thus, under such uncertain period, any risk is unwelcomed. Furthermore, in this entire discussion, it is important to remember that the Municipal Act 2001 requests the town to adopt and maintain a policy with respect to the manner in which the town will ensure that it's accountable to the public for its action. The policy incorporates 3 principles to guide an action, with the first one is accountabilities. We then ask ourselves, if the town opt in, how would you be accountable in everything and dedicate in everything when you have no control? How would you manage your budget to deliver your promise and ensure the road safety around school zone? How would you sustain Oakville's financial positions? The bottom line is Oakville cannot take this risk. Opening cannabis retail store is not going to make the town great. You're gonna break your promise of doing that. And thus, in summary, your residents, again, me standing here representing 144 neighbors and their families, asking you, please be refocused, be reprioritized, and be reconsidered, and say no to cannabis retail store in Oakville. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for your information. Questions?
May I?
Just a moment, please. Just a minute, please. Councillor O'Meara.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask if you were aware that it wasn't the town of Oakville that would be opening this up. It would be private business, private money.
Totally.
Not to do
Totally.
with our town budget.
Totally. As I mentioned, we had the time to review the staff report or the legislations and then the market reports. So we totally understand what is the position, and the position is open the retail. Our point is that a lot of pressure will be downcast to the town, and that will eventually impact your budget.
Okay, thank you, Worship.
Thank you very much for your information.
And Mr. Mayor, can I just say something out of this presentation?
No,
which is, no?
I'm sorry. You're done.
It's related topic.
You're done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
That's the end of the delegations? Yes. All right. We now will open the microphone to others who have new information for council. If you, I usually caution everybody, if you have the same information, it's better to say me too than to repeat it at length. Is there anybody else with information for council on this item? Yes, sir. Please come forward, identify yourself for the clerk, and share your information with us.
Hi, good evening. My name is Courtney Campbell, and I see that you guys are faced with a very difficult task today because a lot of people are divided on this thing. And I was a little bit concerned that there was so much fear in the community about this. A few years ago, well, I'll just give you a little two back steps. So I don't smoke cannabis or I don't consume it, never had it, never had a CBD or anything like that. But the fact is, I am the black market you guys have been talking about. So, in fact, if you guys have questions about the black market, I'm probably a good person to ask questions about. We know what's going on with it. We know why the municipality only controls 30% of the market. We know why they're not being successful with what they're doing. And we've wanted to participate in the market alongside the government or with them. A lot of the councillors have not really embraced the idea that civilians can participate in it, and we would like to prove otherwise. So if you do have questions about the black market, please ask me. We have a membership of over 300,000 people. We feed about 150 families, and we've employed over 80 people that wouldn't otherwise be employable. So, and they've changed their lives from it. We have documented it. We have this information, and I think it'd be a mistake for you to opt out again, as this is a population of about 200,000 people. And if you know the statistics, about 26% of Canadians use cannabis. So that's 50,000 people in Oakville, roughly. So by sticking your head in the sand or pretending it doesn't exist, those people are going to use the cannabis with or without you. And whether the money stays in Oakville or they have to travel to get it, they will. And I think this is something that has not been understood. And in terms of, sorry. Oh, sorry. In some of the, in regards to some of the fear that has happened, I mean, fear is something that's been with us for a number of years. Since 1923, since they made cannabis prohibited or illegal, there's been fear for 90 years of it, and something has changed. So what has changed? Is cannabis less dangerous than it was 100 years ago? Or did we just come to our senses? Not quite sure what has happened, but something has happened. Now, when it comes to the people being afraid, we can understand that, but people were afraid of a lot of things. They were afraid of black people. They did, they were afraid of a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? At some point, they were like, if we let them in our communities, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. So there's lots of things that people can be afraid of, but you can't live your life based on fear. And also, too, they told us that potentially we wouldn't be able to manage our stores or do what or handle cannabis responsibly. And I can say clearly that we have and we can. And the only thing that we're asking is because we really wanted to participate in the market. That's why Justin Trudeau became Prime Minister. That's why Doug Ford got swept into power, because he alluded to the fact that he was going to open it up. And so we were a little bit concerned that people would opt out of it, as right now, probably in Oakville with the construction along the lakeshore, there's a lot of stores closing. I'm not sure how that's impacting those people. I can't understand how they're staying in business. And I think I'm not sure if you actually know the impact that cannabis or hemp may have on the economy. It's huge. Ontario doesn't really make anything. This product opens it up so that we can enter new realms that we haven't seen before, like manufacturing. It's crazy. What is available is crazy. So a lot of people are just thinking about the recreational aspects of it, which is just smoking or getting high or whatever the case might be. Yes, there's a recreational component, but I think it's clear to us from being on the ground that there's a lot of other things that are there. We were a little bit concerned from the black market perspective that all of you are not getting to participate in the marketplace. It's a huge marketplace. You should be participating in it. You need to know what's going on in there because they're your neighbors. And that's me going on, but I would actually like to see if you did have questions about the black market, because I'd be very happy to see if I can help you. I loved your presentation. We can help you, so you can contact us after. We'll get you the data you want.
Sir, the rules are that you address.
My apologies. You can see I'm completely unkempt, but you can go forward if you do have a question. Mr. Mayor, sorry.
Thank you for your information. Councillor Dudek has a question.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
And for the the brevity that you brought to the discussion.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. What is the price difference between what you would find on in the black market versus what you would find in a store, price-wise? What's the difference?
So the problem is, the municipality has a problem because it needs to add taxation onto it. The black market never had that problem because the cannabis has been at a set price and it's been stable for years. So now it being legal and the municipalities are wanting to participate in it, they need to, because you guys want taxes from it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But whatever the case might be, it needs to be added. So then the undermarket says, hey, do we really have to pay that much? Or depending on how much they have to put on, because you still need a supply chain and so forth. So all those people have to make money in between. And that's why it's struggling to make that happen. However, it doesn't actually have to happen like that. There's other alternatives to doing it. And the, quote, black market is actually willing to contribute in the taxation process. They just don't want to be overburdened by it. And even the consumer doesn't mind doing it. They just also don't want to be overburdened by it. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I can't speak for others around the table. For myself, I'm not afraid of the product. I'm not afraid
That's wonderful.
But what I am concerned about is the lack of control we as a municipality have. And can you speak to that at all? Like, I mean, and it's not fear-mongering.
Yes.
The reality is we don't have any tools by which we can address problems that may, other than through the normal channels. How?
That's fair commentary.
Okay.
So in order for, we think that, just like one of the councilors or somebody had said earlier, it's new. So we're all learning, and we're learning as we go along, right? So that's fine. But I think the province can allow for changes as you go along, because there's going to be some things that are unknown. And I'm surprised that they wouldn't allow the municipalities some controls that they need. But I do think there's room for it. It's premature, but I think in any kind of legislation that you're putting forward, you should be able to maybe caveat that and say, hey, you know what? We want to play ball with you, but we have some concerns, and I don't think they should be withheld. So I think...
and unfortunately, that's the conundrum
what
that we're facing. It's either their way or nothing.
Well, I think if enough people tell them, which we're here trying to have a discussion about
Valid
it,
point.
and if you tell them, they may listen. They may listen, yeah. They may, thank you.
We have a couple more councilors with questions for you. I just ask council to try to stick to questions and not veer off into debate. Councilor Chisholm and then Councilor Lischinen.
Thank you, Worship. Just a clarification on the definition of black market. Are you a legal entity?
Technically, we're a legal entity. I don't like to discuss that on the record, but because there's some caveats to it. But if afterward I could explain it in detail to you, our position on it. As we were saying, we believe we have a right to the market because we're natural people here and we have a right to the market. And a lot of the legislation has excluded us. So that's what's caused a lot of the problems, in fact, because the legislation, I mean, for the most part, unfortunately, the people that have been prosecuting cannabis for so long are the people in control of it. And so that hasn't actually allowed the people that know about it, that have been using it, that understand the culture, to participate. They're only consumers. And that's unfortunate. It doesn't have to be that way because we don't have to lose for them to win. So I think that there's a middle ground there. I'm not sure if I touched your question, but if you...
So just to be clear, your operation before the legalization was happening?
No. So 2014, Mr. Trudeau said, hey, I think we should legalize cannabis. Canada was completely behind it. Okay, he became Prime Minister. It's been 6 years later. It's a very difficult thing to roll out, clearly. And the reason it's been difficult is because one, there's the health issues, there's the concerns that people have, and then there's the money. Who's going to get it? Is there going to be a change of power? Is that going to go to people that are bad people or good people? What's going to happen to it? So a lot of that's going on with people. So to answer your question, after 2014, And coming into so I'm new to the cannabis market myself. And unfortunately, I was wrong about it, as a lot of people I know. So I was afraid of it. I actually thought it was an evil drug. So I grew up fearing it. And I didn't actually know that so much mental illness was there. I didn't know why people used it. And I didn't actually know about it. Over the last 3 years, though, if I can answer the question a little more complete. So close to or just before legalization, we were anticipating being able to participate in the market. So I got into the business, and we were anticipating being able to be grandfathered in, or that there was going to be an application process which we could we could be a part of. But it went to a lottery, and we couldn't be a part of that, and it just went sideways.
Thank you.
So yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Liszczyna.
Thank you, Your Worship. What percentage of your market is youth?
I'm sorry?
What percentage of your market is youth, so 19 and under?
Well, I don't know what percent of the Canadian population that's youth that uses cannabis, but
your market?
Yes, so we don't, we're responsible retailing, so we only sell to.
So you check a driver's license?
Oh, absolutely, yes, absolutely. So we check and we record all our membership, so that's why we know we have 300,000 membership. We know who they are, like we understand the demographics behind it.
Okay.
And none of them are under 19, to answer your question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Adams, where are you going to go with this?
Okay, so you said you've got a membership of 300,000?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
And are you selling online?
Well, I'll discuss that with you also. Off the
Are
record.
are you selling down on the street corner?
I'll discuss that with you off the record.
So not being, all right, not being specific.
Yes.
Are
Councillor, Council, we've ranged very far and wide away from should we opt in or continue to opt out.
Well, I guess the question, I understand.
Can we focus?
I am trying to, what I'm trying to get to is, are you selling in this market right now?
We would like to.
You would like to, but
We would like to,
But
yeah.
you're not saying you are.
No, because we would like to be able to sell in this market. We think Oakville could use the infusion. Cannabis is going to happen with or without you. So if you opt in or opt out, it's going to happen. And so what we believe, though, is like some other people, I don't think there should be a cannabis store on every corner. I don't think there should be a liquor store on every corner. So I do believe that there should be controls. But like we said, if 26% of the Canadians use cannabis, that's 50,000 people in Oakville that you don't know about.
So I understand that.
Yeah,
Well,
so-
I'm trying to understand, you said that you were the black market.
Yes, technically, yes.
So,
I am a black man.
but that means, to most of us here, to most of us here in this context means that you are selling something underground or that you're buying something underground.
We don't appreciate being called illicit or underground or technically black market because we want to participate, right? So we think that they've gotten it wrong. And so I'm here today because I'd like to speak for those thousands of people you don't know exist. And we want you to know what we think. So, you know, I mean, I could keep on going on about it, but the fact is,
Okay.
we want to participate in it.
Thank you for your information.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I hope you guys can make the right decision tonight. Thank you.
All right. I think we now know where everybody stands. And I'm going to restrict it to table. Oh, sir, do you have new information for us? Please come to the podium and introduce yourself and share your information with us. So the decision in front of council is opt-in, opt-out, and council, believe me, would appreciate people sort of focusing on that.
Okay.
We look forward to your information.
Yeah, I will be very short. Actually, I'm a newcomer to here. 5 months ago, I decided to move to Canada. I'm the permanent resident Actually, it's the big when I decided to come, one of my friend, he was the e-vapor, the manufacturer in China. He told me 90% e-vapor products were produced in China, Shenzhen, and imported, exported to all over the world. And he suggests I can do the business in, the North American, the general, the representative. I can sell the e-vapor products across. He said, hey, you will go to the Canada, you can sell the e-vapor products because the Canadians, they allow the marijuana to legal. But I said, my answer is quite clear. No, it's against my value, my moral, I cannot do it. There are thousands of ways I can make money. It's not related to money. I mean, I make money through the clean ways. I will make the clean money, the first point. The second is why I choose to move to Oakville. This is the best place I can find in Canada. Yeah, and how to say, we choose our life, and our life is depend on our decision. It really depends how we decide to protect Oakville, protect the community. So I express my strong opinion against to sell the marijuana products here. Okay.
Thank you very much for your information.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to restrict it to table. We have a number of options in front of us. Council number one needs to decide which of the two recommendations in the report to move, to uphold the decision to opt out, or to direct the clerk to advise the registrar of the AGCO that the Council of the Town of Oakville opted in to allow cannabis stores within the Town of Oakville. Do we have a mover for that? One of those, I mean. Councillor Adams?
I would move that council's decision of January 14th, 2019 to opt out of having cannabis retail stores within the Town of Oakville be upheld.
All right, thank you.
And
now, Councillor Grant.
Your Worship, I understand that there's also the Appendix A element that needs to be moved as well. I'd move that.
All right, thank you. And is there a seconder for Councillor Adams's motion? Councillor Lischina. Now, Councillor Grant has written a proposed motion, which I believe should be, could be treated as an amendment to the main motion. And the point of his motion is to, well, I need to ask him what the point is. His motion is that the Town of Oakville conduct public consultation and hold town hall meetings in order to weigh the opinions of our residents over the repercussions of opting in for the sale and public use of cannabis products in the town. And it's not entirely clear to me that that's antithetical to the main motion now before us. It could be perfectly well understood as an additional thing to do. You could add words to it to have the effect of delaying the decision while this was done. Depends on what you're trying to do.
That's a really interesting question you've posed. I would think that in the interest of trying to get the motion passed, perhaps instead of waiting a year for the next decision, we say have a response or have this before us again within a certain time frame, not a year. So 6 months, 8 months?
So you would like to move an amendment to the motion on the floor to revisit the decision in 6 months? After appropriate public consultation?
If that suits.
It's entirely within your power to move an amendment to that effect.
Fair enough, just if I can speak to it.
Well, you have to get a seconder before you get to do that.
Very good. Well, then let's say, we will say 6 months. We will say 6 months, but certainly try and give staff the appropriate amount of time so we can get proper consultation.
Okay, so you want to revisit this in 6 months after public consultation. Is there a seconder for this? fails for a lack of a second. Councillor O'Meara.
Your worship, I move a motion to defer the item, please.
All right. Is there a seconder? Councillor Robertson. Shall I put the vote?
Can I speak to why I
Sure,
would
go ahead.
like the deferral? I appreciate that. We heard from staff today, they do not have the information that we requested. There has not been enough time to get the information for a variety of reasons outside of our control, outside of their control. I have never once seen taking more time to make the right decision be worse than rushing in and making the right decision. So I would ask my council colleagues to don't jump into this, get the information. This is about opting in. It's not about whether it should be legalized, and I would ask my colleagues to support taking the time, letting staff get the information and coming back to council.
Councillor Grant?
And could we tack on better public consultation to that?
This is a deferral of the motion, so that's all it is.
Fair enough, but nevertheless, I mean, we both have the same objectives, I believe.
Under our rules, I think it'd be out of order to move the same thing twice. All right, the motion to defer has been seconded by Councillor Robertson. I would tell you that my position is that to get zoning control and business licensing, we need to hold out. And I believe that the best way to do that is to pass the motion on, the main motion on the floor. And so I won't vote to defer. But having said that, are there other speakers? Councillor Elgar?
Is there a possibility to put a timeline on what Councillor O'Meara has put forward? Because I think there should be a timeline like this. Don't want to rag the puck here.
There's not a lot of difference between bringing it back in 6 months and deferring it for 6 months, but.
Well, to me, 6 months isn't enough anyway to get staff's information. So I'm hoping if he would go for 1 year, so we get all the information, then I can support it.
Councillor, how long are you deferring it?
I'm not sure if it's appropriate. Can I ask staff how long they think they need to get the information that they said that they don't have today?
In the interest of trying to make a decision, I think it's fine to ask staff.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, unfortunately, it's a bit hard to tell because we don't know what information is going to become available. But I would certainly say at a minimum, a year would be reasonable.
I'd be happy with that, Your Worship.
Okay, so we'll understand that Councillor O'Meara's motion is to defer for a year. Councillor Haslett-Thiel.
I would think that we would, and I would ask that you would consider that a deferral within a year that includes a form of a greater public consultation be added to that.
I believe staff heard a lot of the issues around tonight.
It's just a motion to defer. We just defeated we're going to tie ourselves up here.
But we defeated it because 6 months was too short. Yes. Whereas, and I think there are people around the table who may support, listen, let's have a greater conversation.
If Councillor O'Meara's motion fails, you'd be free to bring your own, if he doesn't want to change his.
That's why I'm asking.
I'm waiting to hear from him.
As far as I know from a procedure by law, I'm deferring the decision we're making tonight and I'm setting a timeline. I don't get to set any other caveats and acrimonies to it. I get to just defer the motion in front of us and we can come back and make this decision in a year from now. What that looks like, we'll leave it to staff.
He's correct, and anybody can bring a request for report asking staff to do those consultation things quite apart from this. So it's not like you can't get public consultation any other way. So you might want to consider bringing a request for report to the next regular council meeting. May I put the vote? All those in favor of deferral, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and that carries. The matter is deferred. Now, the main motion had in it the submission of the comments to the province. Those are due March 10th. It's kind of an interesting position that we just put ourselves in where we're not going to comment for a year.
Sorry, Your Worship, I was understood there were two separate though. Councillor Adams moved the report and then the appendix, or were those all under one motion?
Well, they were one motion, but we have the power to separate items, and if you're saying that you were only deferring the first item,
That was my intention, to just defer that item and to proceed.
that's charming and very helpful, and that allows me to call the vote on the remainder.
Thank you, Your Worship.
All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you, everybody. Now we need only the consideration and reading of the bylaws. Councillor Dudek and someone else, Councillor Lischina. All those in favor? And the confirmatory bylaw is carried. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and we are adjourned.